everyone, and welcome to the RotoWire Fantasy Basketball Podcast. I am Mike Barner. He is Kirien Sprecher, back from vacation, and we come to you every Wednesday to give you the information that you need to win your fantasy basketball leagues. Kirien, how was the vacation? We missed you.
It was fantastic. Not enough basketball as I would have hoped, but happy to be back on the show with you. Let's get into it.
It's great to have Kirien back, but unfortunately, we have to start today's show on a somber note. I'm not kidding. This was really tough. I saw this about 15 minutes ago. My heart sank. Jalen Johnson of the Atlanta Hawks is out for the rest of the season with a torn labrum in his left shoulder. I am in first place in 3 leagues. I have Jalen Johnson on all 3 of those teams. I am crushed right now, Kirien. Take me out of this depression.
I mean, that's a lot to ask. I don't think I could do that, man. With the way the waiver wire is looking right now, hopefully the trade deadline opens up some opportunities for players where, players that own or, fantasy managers that had rostered Jalen Johnson can find someone to help. But like you said, you're going to have to pick up Jalen Smith in one league. I'm looking at like Daniel Gafford in like a 10-12 team league that I have him in. So like there's some options out there, but no one's going to replace Jalen Johnson, man. This was probably going to win most improved player, a super ascending player this year. But this is the second straight season where his campaign has come to an end early due to injuries. Last year it was an ankle and then he fractured his wrist. This year he dealt with an ankle, but it's mostly been that shoulder injury that he re-injured a couple weeks ago. Just absolutely tough break for a player that had the Hawks like contending this year for a long part of the season. There's no one that you can just 1-for-1 replace him with off the waiver wire, right? We're going to have to get creative. We're going to have to try to make a trade. We're going to have to wait to see what the trade deadline does to like that shakes the league and opens up more opportunities for players. But this is just not good news to start the day with at all.
Yeah, exactly like you said. The only positive here is it happened a week before the trade deadline. So now you have a roster spot to play with. So drop him and pick up a stash. Pick up Donovan and Klingon. Pick up Isaiah Collier, Jalen Smith, those kinds of guys. Ayo Dosunmu. Use his roster spot to pick up a stash. As terms of where the Hawks are, we now have to worry about them falling out of the play-in tournament, I think, because they are not nearly the same team without Jalen Johnson. DeAndre Hunter gets a boost with him out, although he hasn't been doing much in terms of rebounds. Maybe he'll have to now that Jalen Johnson's out. Okongwu is already starting. This is good news for him because he's going to really be needed to hit the boards here. Vit Krejci, I hope I'm saying his name right. I always kind of butcher him a little bit. He gets a little bit of a boost, maybe 12 or 14-team leagues. He's an ad, not a 10-teamer. But I think your biggest addition here, DeAndre Hunter might be available, so he's someone you could add for immediate help. But use that Jalen Johnson spot on your roster as a stash to get someone who could be a big benefit from the trade deadline.
And like you said, the Hawks have lost 6 straight. Johnson has missed 3, and then he left the 4th game early, so that has a lot to do with his absence. If they continue to fall down the standings, they might be one of these teams that are tanking towards the end of the season, depending on where Trae Young's health is at. So, like, even replacing Johnson with someone on the Hawks could be risky business if they fall into that tanking territory in a couple weeks.
All right, I'm going to try to perk up here, and let's keep the show rolling. So yesterday, we were going to lead the show with this today, but that Jalen Johnson news overtook it. Yesterday, it was reported of several sources, including Shams of ESPN. Before we talk about this, so there was the Woj bomb. Is there a thing for Shams now? Does he have one? Because I have a recommendation if you don't.
All right, I'm all ears.
What about a Shams wow? Remember the Sham wow? How about a Shams wow? Oh, it's a Shams wow.
It may take some getting used to, but I think if you nail it down, we can make that a thing for sure.
All right, that's going to be the official of the RotoWire, at least the Wednesday episode of the RotoWire Fantasy Basketball Podcast. There's no more Woj bombs. There's Shams wow. And the Shams wow yesterday was that the Kings are expected to open talks about potentially trading De'Aaron Fox. Fox then, I guess, has a target destination. Surprise! He wants to play with the Spurs and Victor Wembanyama. What do you think, Kirien? Do you think De'Aaron Fox is going to get moved next week? I don't think so. Too many moving parts for a big player like that. But what do you think?
Yeah, I don't know if he's going to get traded this year, but obviously he's already set this in motion where he's like, I'm probably not going to be back. I have a preferred destination. You know where I know where I want to go. And that also kind of takes away other teams that may want to trade for him because you're only going to be trading for him for a year and a half or a year, depending on when that move would happen. I've heard the Rockets, the Spurs, and the Heat. Obviously, like you said, I think the Spurs are the most obvious. The Heat, they're going to be desperate, especially if they move Jimmy. I'm not really sold on like a Fox Hero backcourt, but I think like Fox, Adebayo, and Kel'el Ware, who's just been absolutely tearing it up recently, I think that could be like a lethal defensive trio. So that kind of makes sense. And also the Heat will have money and they'll have assets if they move Butler. And then the Rockets, the Rockets are doing really well. I know Fred VanVleet hasn't been like the guy that they expected him to be. He's getting up there. They could use an upgrade. But I don't really want to mess anything with the Rockets right now. The way they ended last season and the way they're playing this season, they're one of the best teams in the league. Adding a player like Fox obviously like boosts your upside a little bit. But, you know, that could also have some ripple effects, some domino effects towards the rest of the roster. And I don't really think they need to make a move like that this early in their come up just because they have so many young players already.
Yeah, I mean, Fox has already, the report said that he's going to discourage other teams for trading for him because he has the preferred destination in mind. So basically, he wants to go to the Spurs, but he doesn't want the Spurs to have to trade Stefan Castle or Devin Vassell or Jeremy Sohan because he wants to play with all of them and Wembanyama. Now we see if the Kings blink and trade him, hoping to get something, and do the Spurs say, well, listen, maybe we will give up Stefan Castle to make sure that we get De'Aaron Fox. So this is going to be interesting. I don't think if you have Fox in fantasy, don't panic. I don't think he's going anywhere this week. Nothing. Malik Monk's not all of a sudden going to be running the Kings. So don't be overexcited there and give up too much to get Malik Monk. I think if Fox gets traded, it will be in the summer.
Yeah, I agree.
All right. Injury news. Paul George did not play Tuesday against the Lakers. He had an MRI that determined he has an extension tendon injury on his left fifth finger. I think that's the pinky. I'm not great at math, but I'm pretty sure that means he hurt his pinky. So there is no timetable for him to return. They play again tonight against the Kings. Shocker, a guy on the 76ers does not have a timetable for a return. So with him out, Tyrese Maxey, 43 points against the Lakers last night. He's averaging 31.6 points over his last 11 games. Kelly Oubre has also been playing well lately over his last 12 games, 17.3 points, 7.5 rebounds, 2.4 assists, and 1.6 steals. We really like to see that. But again, Kieran, you could talk about Joel Embiid and Paul George every Wednesday. I kind of feel like we do. It was important to give an update here, but we're probably not going to see Paul George maybe for a little while.
Yeah, agreed. And they say minor injury. Even if we do see him again this week, you know, he'll probably miss another game next week. It's just the way that this season is trending for the Sixers. And I don't expect that to change anytime soon, especially with them not winning games. You know, we're about to talk about Anthony Davis quick, but that game last night. So like last night was like the first night I could like actually sit down and watch basketball in like 2 weeks. And I got a steaming pile of garbage from two contending teams and two teams that are not in the mix at all playing super hard. And I was like, did the world change when I came back from Hawaii? I'm not really sure because Ricky Council looks like the best player on the court right now.
That was not the night to come back because that was a terrible slate.
And you know, thankfully I'm abiding by my New Year's resolution and I'm not going to overreact about one game last night, but holy cow, the Bucks and the Lakers did not look good. And we're about to talk about Anthony Davis, so that's a good lead into that.
Yes, yeah. Anthony Davis left yesterday's game with an abdominal muscle strain. He did not return. The next game for the Lakers is tomorrow against the Wizards. I would be shocked if he plays in that game. He has an injury history. They want to make sure he stays healthy. Against the Wizards, they don't need him to play.
There was just an update a couple minutes ago. He's going to miss at least a week and be reevaluated.
Was that a Shams Wow?
No, I'm trying to find out.
Okay. We're trying to get this Shams Wow thing to stick here. I'm really proud of this. So now with Anthony Davis going to be out potentially here for a week, we see more scoring upside for Austin Reeves, Rui Hachimura. Maybe the Lakers ask more for him. I think Reeves is probably the biggest beneficiary simply because he's going to need to shoot a lot more. The Lakers have, Jared Vanderbilt's back, so he's going to steal some minutes. Not necessarily anybody you want to pick up in fantasy. He's not really a fantasy-friendly option, more of a better real-life basketball player than a fantasy option, right, Kirien?
Absolutely. And then you look at a guy like Dorian Finney-Smith and you're like, oh, maybe they play some small ball center and he shoots some threes, but like his production in LA has been garbage, and DFS has always been more of a like, oh, he could be a guy than a guy that actually produces. So like you said, a boost to LeBron, a boost to Anthony Reeves, and that's Austin Reeves, and that's about it there.
All right, another injury. Steph Curry did not play Tuesday against the Jazz because of a knee issue. However, we're not panicking here. That was the first game of a back-to-back set for the Warriors, likely just a rest situation. One positive from that game, Brandon Podziemski finally coming to life, 20 points, 7 rebounds, 6 assists, and 4 three-pointers over 32 minutes. But that was because Curry was out. We're not panicking here, right, Kirien? We should see Steph back on the floor tonight.
Yeah, and he's been dealing with the knees issue. It's a bilateral knee thing. I had one writer who's like, I don't even know if that's a thing, and I'm like, yeah, it's just an old a guy that's getting old, and he has a lot of miles on those knees. He's been sitting out at least one half of back-to-backs for the most part. Sometimes he plays both half. He just hasn't been as prolific as he has been, and I think this knee issue is a real thing. I'm hoping that maybe the All-Star break can give him a little bit of an extended break. I'm assuming he's not going to have to play much in the All-Star game. Hopefully we'll see a couple threes, but not play like the whole game as usual. And then when he comes back, maybe that extended rest will get him right, and hopefully the Warriors. But even when he's on the court, you have to start him if you have him in fantasy. I'm not saying you have to move on from him. You just can't expect him to be dropping 50 every other week and hitting 10 threes. That just hasn't been the player he is this year because of the ongoing knee issue.
Another injury from last night. Jerami Grant left against the Bucks with an ankle injury, did not return. He's having a disappointing season, averaging 14.5 points, 3.4 rebounds per game. More Denny Avia. Denny Avia has been great, averaging 18.9 points, 8.2 rebounds, 4.1 assists, 1.5 steals, and 1.6 three-pointers over the last 14 games since moving in the starting lineup. That is awesome. We love to see that. If Grant misses time, more for Avdia, maybe a little bit more Shaedon Sharpe, right, Kirien?
Yep, absolutely agree there. Avdia was pulling out the Stone Cold Steve Austin. You can't see me last night. He was attacking the rim, hitting threes. We've, for I don't know how many years in a row it's been Jerami Grant in trade conversations. If he misses time, it's probably clears the picture from a fantasy perspective because Avdia Sharpe, to a lesser extent, like Scoot Henderson, these guys get more opportunities with the ball in their hands. And that's probably what the Trailblazers are going to have to turn towards in the second half anyways.
Well, we've moved past the injuries from yesterday, but don't worry, guys. We still have injuries for today. Hornets game tonight against the Nets, 2 tanking teams. LaMelo Ball and Mark Williams are out. Williams has a foot injury, quote-unquote injury. I'm going to guess he's probably sitting because the Hornets would like to lose this game to the Nets. Now, LaMelo Ball, he has a legitimate injury. He did get hurt Monday against the Lakers. He left that game early. Hopefully, it's a one-game situation, but Ball with his ankles is very concerning. We're going to see a lot of Miles Bridges tonight, some Nick Smith Jr., Musa Diabate. Eric Collins is going to go nuts when Diabate pulls down 10 rebounds in this game. So probably not worried about Mark Williams, but a little worried about LaMelo Ball, right, Kirien?
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. And look, the Hornets are 6 games out of the play-in tournament. They've already lost Brandon Miller. They're probably not going to be playoff bound. Even if Ball comes back, he's probably going to rest towards the second half of the season. So there's major concern there. And you nailed it with all those guys. You throw Mishik in there, Josh Green. We're going to see somebody out of Charlotte have a bigger role in the second half because of the resting, because of the injuries.
That's the thing that's going to stink about these tanking teams. They're already showing when they play each other, all of their top fantasy player options sit, which stinks. Those are the ones that you want those guys to be in so they can torch those bad defenses. So that's something to keep an eye on and remember moving forward. Teams like the Jazz, the Hornets, the Nets, the Trailblazers have been resting some of their best players. Or they have injuries. Injuries. I shouldn't say flat out resting because some of them are injured, wink, wink. But that's something to keep in mind. So before we move on to our next segment, we've got to talk about the Chicago Bulls. This is not the official Bulls Minute. We'll do that a little bit later. But let's talk about Zach LaVine. He's out Wednesday against the Celtics. He will miss at least the next 3 games. Not an injury concern for LaVine. His wife is pregnant. Sounds like the baby is coming. Kobe White He's missed the last 4 games with an ankle injury. He is questionable tonight against the Celtics. They did say that they expected him back at some point on this road trip that they're on that ends Sunday. So for tonight, if there's no Kobe White, a lot of Ayo Dosunmu, a lot of Josh Giddey. If White does come back, still a boost for those two with LaVine out for at least the next 3 games, right, Kirien?
Yeah, absolutely. I think they do get a boost, but I think then the presence of Lonzo Ball limits their upside. Obviously last year, Kobe White was, top 50 fantasy player while LaVine was hurt, and Ayo had some moments too. But I think Lonzo there, you just got to temper your expectations a little because he's been playing really well and has the ball in his hands a lot too. Kobe White coming off an injury absence, it may take him a game or two to find that shooting stroke. Going back to LaVine though, he couldn't have had a better January, especially for a guy that maybe is hopefully he probably doesn't want to get traded right after he has a kid, but maybe if he wants to play in the playoffs, he wants to get traded. He averaged 28 points, 5 boards, 5 assists, and a steal, and shot 53% from the field in January. That's a fantastic stretch of ball for a guy that has, gotten a pretty hard rap over the last couple of years due to his play in Chicago.
This is a perfect segue into our second segment. As we all know, the NBA trade deadline is next week. It is Thursday of next week. So we are in the thick of trade rumor season. So, Kirien, let's talk about some guys who are in the forefront of the trade rumors and predict if they will get traded or not, and then what the fantasy fallout could be. So we're going to kind of do semi-rapid fire here because we got a lot of names to talk about. Some of these we've talked about before, so we'll go a little quicker. First up, the biggest name on the trade market, other than De'Aaron Fox, who we don't think is going to get traded, Jimmy Butler.
Until the summer.
Yeah. Jimmy Butler. Will he or will he not be traded, Kirien?
I mean, I think he's got to be traded at this point. It's if you're ever going to do this to an owner, I feel like Pat Riley is the last guy you want to stare down a barrel with, have a standoff with. Clearly that's not really going Butler's way at this point, but I do think Butler gets his way eventually. I would assume that Golden State makes the most sense right now just because the Heat lowered their asking price, and if Golden State is willing to add Wiggins, then that might make more sense for Miami, whereas the Suns would be my second option, and that's going to take a whole bunch of 4-team, 5-team trades, moving off for Beal, so many different variables going on there that, not saying that that's impossible, it's just less likely. So I think right now, if I had to make a prediction, I would say Butler's going to be a Golden State Warrior.
I think he definitely gets traded, and that's great news. I have an article on RotoWire.com today. Make sure you check out the site. And the article about buy low, sell high, and hold guys in fantasy. Jimmy Butler is a hold right now. You're hoping he gets traded. You don't want to drop him, or you don't want to sell him right now because his fantasy value is as low as it can get because he's just not playing. So you definitely want to see him get traded. I think he gets traded. You said the Warriors. I'll say the Suns. These NBA superstars tend to find a way to end up on the team they want to be on. So we'll say that with Jimmy Butler. Now, moving a little bit down the pecking order, how about Cameron Johnson? Will he or will he not be traded?
I'm going to go with he will be traded, and I think he's going to be a Laker. This is, before a little foreshadowing, everybody could be a Laker. Maybe that's just the Lakers media. I don't really know how that makes much sense because the Lakers don't have many assets. But I think the Lakers and the Nets already have a connection. They already traded for DFS. They already, are scouting their picks. They already, they're familiar with all of those assets and variables and blah, blah, blah. I think Cameron Johnson should have been the player the Lakers traded for in the first place over DFS, but Cameron Johnson was dealing with some injuries. So I think maybe they want to see him healthy and then they'll make a move for him. There was also interest that the Cavaliers were interested in Cameron Johnson. The Kings were interested in Cameron Johnson. I just don't think either of those teams are as desperate right now. And I think moving on for the Kings, they would have to move on from Keegan Murray. And I kind of like Keegan Murray more than Cameron Johnson just because of his age right now. So I don't think the Kings make much sense. And I don't think the Cavs are super desperate, even though we had to axe the Dean Wade update for the news section because it was getting too long, but he's going to miss some time. So I don't think necessarily losing Dean Wade makes the Cavs go, we got to make a trade. But you never know.
Yeah, I think he's definitely going to get traded. Where, I don't know. I do like that fit on the Cavs, so I would like to see that. Yeah. But I think the biggest takeaway here is his fantasy value could be in real trouble.
Yeah.
Right now he's not playing, so he's hurt, quote unquote. Surprisingly, he'll be reevaluated right around the same time as the All-Star break. Wink, wink, hint, hint. He's fine. or he'll be fine by the time he gets traded. So, he's not someone that you want to just flat out drop, see where he lands, see how the first couple weeks go with him in a new team. But, man, I'll tell you, if he gets traded to the Cavaliers, I mean, his value is going to take a massive hit. It's not like Donovan Mitchell or Darius Garland are going to give up shots for Cam Johnson. So he's someone to keep an eye on here in terms of his fantasy value taking a big hit. And we don't know what the Nets are going to look like in general. We've talked about them a couple of times. We could see Ben Simmons gone. We could see D'Angelo Russell gone. So we're going to take a wait and see approach. If you're stashing guys, I'm not stashing guys in the Nets. I'm stashing, Klingon and Jalen Smith and Isaiah Collier and guys like that I think have much higher upside than Keon Johnson or Zaire Williams or something like that. All right, CJ McCollum of the New Orleans Pelicans, another veteran here on the list. Will he or won't he be traded, Kirien?
So, most of the updates I've seen have been there's lots of teams interested in McCollum, but none of those updates specify a specific team that is interested in McCollum. So I'm not really sure. Obviously, we've seen him have some huge performances that maybe draw the attention of some guys. The Pelicans they're going to need to make a move, but I don't think they're going to get the assets that they want to get for a guy like McCollum. So I'm going to just say no trade here. I don't think anybody's willing to really part ways with tangible assets to acquire an aging McCollum. Not that he can't have an impact. And I don't think the Pelicans are really going to get what they're asking for. So I just don't see a deal coming to fruition with McCollum.
I'm with you. No deal here. He makes $33.3 million this year and $30.7 million next season. We've seen how the second apron hinders teams from making moves. Taking on CJ McCollum at almost $31 million next year. I don't see a trade here. Now, another guy who's been in the rumors a lot, Bradley Beal. The problem here is his no trade clause, Kirien, but will he or will he not be traded?
So I think, like I said, if I'm going to go on the side of Jimmy Butler to the Warriors, then that means Beal is not going to get traded because that's the only player that the Suns are going to would want to do all of the, moving all the parts around to get Butler would be to try to trade Beal. So, and I don't think any team is really going to, any teams will want to do a 3 or 4 team trade just for Beal. So I don't really think he's going to get traded unless it's for a Butler thing. But I've already put my stake in the ground and said Butler to Golden State. So I have to stick with that and say Beal will not get traded and he'll continue with his bench role for the Suns.
Well, I said Butler's going to the Suns, so that means Bradley Beal is going away from the Suns. I do think they'll find a way. I don't know. He'll get some sweetener. They'll find a way to convince him to waive his no trade clause, and I think he will be out of there. Now, the Washington Wizards. We got 2 guys on the Wizards, Kyle Kuzma and Jordan Poole. Will either of them be traded? Neither of them or both?
So this is another, the Lakers make perfect sense, but do they? Not really. If I was a contending team, if I ran a contending team, I don't think Kyle Kuzma would be the number 1 guy on my list of, this guy makes us, he's going to turn us from an Eastern Conference final appearance to an NBA Finals winner. I don't think Kyle Kuzma is that guy. I don't think Kuzma is going to get traded. Jordan Poole, the other guy on the Wizards, there was apparently some interest from the Nuggets. That was back in early December. That's before Russ, just absolutely turned into a 25-year-old again and became awesome. So I don't think Poole or Kuzma are going to get traded.
I will say yes for Kuzma, no for Poole. And here's why. Kuzma's contract is actually going down. He's making $23.5 million this year, $21.5 million next season, and the season after that, $19.4 million. We see how salaries are going up across the league. His are going down. Now, he's not the player that he was a couple seasons ago, but he's still a decent scorer, and at a descending salary, I think that makes him appealing. The opposite can be said for Poole. He's $29.7 million this year, $31.8 million next season, and $34 million in 26-27. I don't see any contending team taking a shot on him there. So I say yes, yes, Kuzma, and no for Poole. Now, a guy we just talked about, Jerami Grant. Before we say whether or not he will be traded, Kirien, I just want to give you this stat. This is not a what was that stat line of the week. This is a stat that I came across. His first 2 seasons with the Portland Trail Blazers, Jerami Grant has played a total of 11 games in the month of March and no games in the month of April. Spring showers bring no games for Jerami Grant. Will he or will he not be traded?
Well, he's owed $30 million this season and $100 million through 2028. So I'm just going to say no. He is not going to get traded.
100%. That his country has a player option for the 2027-28 season at $36.4 million. The guy's not even averaging 15 points on a tanking team. Oh my gosh. Who wants that? Nobody. Jerami Grant, enjoy Portland. He's not going to play, let's see, what over under games after March 10th. If I set that at 0.5, would you take the over or the under?
I would have to take the under.
Yes, me too. The odds on that would still be like minus 200, and we'd still take the under.
Despite that contract, though, reports out of LA say that Jerami Grant still fits with the Lakers.
Bronny James and a 2031 second-round pick. That might be all they can get. That's what they're hoping they can give up. All right, now let's go to the Utah Jazz. Collin, Sexton, and Jordan Clarkson. Either, neither, or both getting traded, Kirien.
This is an interesting one. I don't have any specific targets in mind, but I think both of these guys will get traded. I think Utah, Danny Ainge, I think they are more than willing to part ways just to show that they are active in the trade market, not necessarily, I'm going to be stingy and wait to get this best deal possible. I also think you mentioned Collier's name multiple times. They want to see him get some action. Keontae George has moved to the bench, but he's had a couple good games off the bench. They still want to get him action. Again, I'm sorry for everyone that I led astray on Keontae George ahead of the season. I'll never forget that one. So I think both these guys get moved. I think you look at like Sexton, maybe there was some interest, a lot of teams could use a guard like Sexton. Like, unlike Kuzma, I think Collin Sexton is a great player to add to a contending team. He can play, 6th, 7th, 8th man role. He can guard a guard, harass them on defense for 15, 20 minutes, make easy buckets, maybe run the offense if you have to. I think Sexton has a lot of value, and then Clarkson can just be a scorer off the bench. So I think both of these guys are much more intriguing than a guy like Kuzma, and they make less. So I think both of them get traded. I don't really have a destination other than the Lakers. Everyone's a perfect fit for the Lakers. So I maybe that's a bad thing on my end that I don't have a prediction, but I do think both of these Utah Jazz guards will get traded.
I think Clarkson is as good as gone. He's making $14.1 million this season and $14.3 for an established bench scoring veteran. That is about as friendly of a contract as it gets. So I think he's very easy to move, and I think he's gone. Sexton, I don't know. He's not making a lot. $18.4 million this season, $19.2 next season. So that's more than Clarkson, but not a hindrance by any means. I hope he gets traded. I'm going to say no because I'm going to give an official answer. But, man, if he doesn't get traded, that really stinks for his fantasy value because I don't think he's going to play hardly at all. I mean, the last month of the season, we might not see him at all. He might play 2 games over the last month. So I think if he gets traded, your initial thought is, oh, man, Collin Sexton got traded. He's not going to have as big of a role as he had on the Jazz. But if he doesn't get traded, he might not play at all. So that's something to keep in mind.
All right, I'll make a prediction. I'll say the Mavericks. I'll say they need to stay afloat a little bit before Doncic comes back healthy. Dinwiddie, Quentin Grimes, they've had their shine. They'll add one more feisty guard to the mix and go get Sexton or Clarkson.
And now it's time for the official Bulls Minute of today's podcast. We're going to end this segment and use the Bulls Minute. Zach LaVine, Nikola Vucevic. Either, neither, or both getting traded, Kirien.
So like I just said, LaVine has been absolutely fantastic. He's boosted his trade interest if he could. He did as much as he could, but I still don't think he gets traded. I think the league-wide sentiment is that he's not a winning player. Whether that's warranted or not, I think that's the reality of the situation. And given his price tag, given what the Bulls are going to ask for him, I don't think any contender is going to be willing to part ways. Vucevic, the Lakers are a perfect fit. I'm sorry, maybe that bit is getting old by now. Similarly to LaVine, I think Vucevic, he had when he was in Orlando, they made the playoffs and he had some good performances in playoffs. Now you kind of see his defensive inefficiency, and any contender who's going to want to trade for a center is going to want to trade for a center that's good on defense, and that's just not really what Vuk does. So I don't think either of these guys get traded, and the Bulls are, stuck in that mediocrity for another half of a season.
All right, I will say that Vucevic does get traded. I think his value is about at its peak right now. He's playing really well. His contract's not terrible. $20 million this season, $21.5 million next season. That's a lot for a center that doesn't play defense, but in terms of overall cap, that's not bad. And he does shoot very well from behind the arc. So a team like the Warriors that needs a center and needs shooting, I think he'd be a great fit for. So I think Vucevic gets dealt. I think they get a first-round pick for him, Kirien. I think Vucevic gets dealt, and they get a first-round pick. Zach LaVine, as much as this breaks my heart to say, I don't think Zach LaVine is going to get traded. $43 million this season, $46 million next season, $49 million player option in 2026-27. I do think he's reestablished his trade value to the point where they don't have to attach a first-round pick to get rid of him. But I think a better opportunity will come up in the summer to trade him with that last half season on his contract. Maybe they get a first-round pick. They probably won't get any good young players back. It'd likely be a salary dump. But maybe they get a couple of expiring contracts and one first-round pick. But I do want to say Jalen Smith, because I think Nikola Vucevic gets traded, he is the guy to add off waivers right now. He's available just about everywhere. Casey Johnson, who is my favorite Bulls beat reporter, thinks that LaVine will not get traded and Vucevic will. So when Casey Johnson has been saying forever that LaVine's not going to get traded. He said it last year when all the talk was that the Bulls were pushing hard to trade LaVine. He wanted to get traded. He said last year he will not be traded, and I think the same thing's going to happen this year. So Jalen Smith would be my stash on the Bulls.
I like that. I think Golden State would be a good fit for Vooch if they did want to move on from him. Maybe Golden State has to make a couple moves to open up some assets to acquire him. Jalen Smith, I like the call. He hasn't really gotten many opportunities to play heavy minutes. The only time he started this season, he had 5 blocks. So you have that. He's played 17 minutes 12 times this season, and during those games, 11 points, 7 boards, and a block per game, shooting over 50% from the field. So he starts playing 20, 25 minutes a game, and you have something on your hands. Don't know if it'll mitigate the Jalen Johnson loss enough, but at least it'll be plug the hole a little bit on your drowning ship.
Now, we're going to take 1 or 2 questions. We're going to do everybody's favorite segment. But before we do that, a word from our friends at Edge Boost. Have you ever had your debit card decline or had to call your bank at 3 a.m. in Vegas? Edge Boost is the first consumer-facing online bank dedicated to the gaming industry. There are numerous benefits to using Edge Boost. $250,000 per day in debit deposits, unlimited withdrawals, cash back on sports betting, DFS, and sweeps, 100% approval for all gaming activity, financial segmentation for discretion and responsible gaming. It's compatible today for prediction markets, iCasino, DFS, sports betting, lottery, brick and mortar casinos, horse racing, and sweeps. That's everything. No transaction reviews or account freezes. Visit edgeboost.bet today and use promo code ROTOPOD. That's promo code ROTOPOD. Kirien, let's pick out 1 or 2 of the questions from the pod. That way, everybody can call Uncle Bob and Aunt Janet and Cousin Dolores into the room for the What Was That Stat Lines of the week.
All right, we had P-Dub from earlier this morning. He said 10-team 9-cat, growing extremely frustrated with owning quickly. Only 1 IR spot, which is currently occupied by Embiid. Any advice on what I should do? Quickly, they said he was day-to-day. The Raptors came out and said he was day-to-day, and now he's missed 8 straight games. There's been no further update on that. Given this trend, that's probably going to bleed into the All-Star break. Maybe he comes back for a couple games before the All-Star break to see where he's at and then, gain his conditioning. Then this is a tough situation. I don't think you can move on from quickly unless there is a clear upgrade on the waivers, depending 10 teams. So there's probably someone out there that could at least fill a starting spot. But I think Quickly has a super high upside when he is going to play. What about you, Mike?
Yeah, the only hesitation here is it being a 10-team league. Like you said, there's probably somebody pretty good on the waiver wire. I think this depends on where you are in the standings. If you're winning a lot and you think you're going to be good for the playoffs here, I wouldn't drop him. If you're struggling and every week is important because if you don't win that week, you might not make it. If you need somebody now and there's a good option in a 10 category league, I'm not opposed to dropping Quickly, but I would try to hold on to him first.
Agreed. Is Beal worth stashing? If he gets traded in that 4 or 5 team thing with Butler going to Phoenix, I think Beal's fantasy value goes up. Like I said, I didn't think he was going to get traded, so probably not worth stashing. If you're on Mike's side and you think he'll get traded, probably worth stashing. I think we agree on that one.
Do you think here's a question for you. Bradley Beal, Donovan Clingan. Which one would you rather stash?
Donovan Clingan.
Okay, me too.
Okay, so thoughts on Embiid returning? Yeah, haha.
Yeah.
that's my answer.
Good joke, Kobe. One more, Kirien.
If you this just quick here. Thoughts on Richards rest of the season? If you have him, start him. There's going to be big games. There's going to be small games. This is the one I really wanted to get into.
All right, let's do it.
Van Dam. I think you're in a pretty good spot here. But this is a great question. In what order would you prioritize these centers rest of season points league? Where absolutely fantastic recently. Pirtle, who was absolutely fantastic early in the season, and Hartenstein, who when he plays, he's absolutely fantastic. The loss of Jalen Johnson hurts here. Give me your prioritization of these 3 centers.
Hartenstein, Pirtle, and Ware would be my order.
Yeah, I think Hartenstein has to be my top guy. And then I think I'm going to go Ware second, maybe to play devil's advocate. My argument would be he'll have a higher upside if Butler moves. And then there's maybe Toronto continues to tank and Pirtle doesn't play as often towards the end of the season, whereas Ware is a young guy, they want to give him minutes. That's a great question.
Great question. Can't argue with that at all. Those two are splitting hairs to me.
For sure. All right.
You've been waiting for this. It's time for the What Was That stat lines of the week. We didn't do this last week without Kirien because it didn't feel right. Kirien, you are up first.
All right. So, like I said, hadn't watched basketball in a couple of weeks. We tuned into the 2 TNT games last night. Was hyped for some good old-fashioned butt kickings from contending teams. That did not happen. But there was an interesting decision by Doc Rivers down the stretch. It was 120-106 with 3:30 left. 3:30 left, and you have Damian Lillard, you have Giannis. That's a lot of time. And Doc subbed out all of the starters. Look, like I know this is end of January game. We're heading into the All-Star break. You want to give these guys some rest. Dame has never won in Portland since leaving. 0-4 overall against the Trailblazers, 0-2 in Portland. I thought this game was they had a chance. Damian Lillard knocks down a 3, even if the Trailblazers waste the entire clock. Like, Dame can hit 2 or 3 threes, and this is a 5-possession game with a minute left. Like, I thought that was a really weird move. It's not necessarily a what was that stat line of the week, but I was kind of laying in bed like, what are you doing, Doc? Like, are you trying to win this game? It didn't really seem that way. Maybe there's some weird feng shui with Dame back in Portland, and he still loves his guys in his hometown, and he wants to give them something to cheer for. But I thought that was really strange. And then my honorable mention, this happened a week and a half ago, but I had to throw it up. Daniel Gafford, 31 points, 15 boards, and 6 blocks. That came with Derek Lively right after Derek Lively was announced that he's going to miss a couple months. That was a very strange performance from Gafford. He set a bunch of Dallas Mavericks center records in that performance. That had me, I wasn't watching games. Obviously, I was still getting the updates, and I was like, what was that? Daniel Gafford, huge performance. He's another guy with Lively out a couple months. Definitely a guy you want to own in fantasy or roster in fantasy. Sorry.
Gafford could be a real difference maker. I mean, and Kleber's out too. Kleber does nothing for fantasy, but he soaks up minutes.
Yes.
Why they play him it's like Hayward Highsmith. Get these guys off the floor. Put somebody in that has some actual upside. Kleber has none. So yeah, I love that call on Gafford. Gafford, man, he's going to be great. Now, I have a positive. What was that stat line of the week? No negatives this week. I can't be. I'm already so sad because of Jalen Johnson. Amen Thompson on January 25th had a triple-double, 23 points, 14 rebounds, 10 assists. He played 41 minutes. He must have done that against the Hornets or the Wizards or the Trailblazers. No, he did it against the Cleveland Cavaliers. He then followed that up. Oh, no, he has to play the Celtics. That's a terrible matchup. He had 33 points, 10 rebounds, and 4 assists in that game Monday. What was that? That was fantastic. Amen Thompson over his last 15 games, averaging 17.1 points, 10.5 rebounds, 3.9 assists, 1.9 steals, 1.5 blocks. And, oh, yeah, he's shooting almost 57% from the field. Now, Tari Eason is back. Sorry, guys. He's not taking minutes away from Amen Thompson. Jabari Smith Jr. is still out, but with the way Amen Thompson's playing, even when he comes back, there's no way he takes more than a couple of minutes away from Amen Thompson. Amen Thompson, triple-double against the Cavaliers. What was that? It was great, and Amen Thompson is going to be a fantasy phenom down the stretch.
Absolutely agree. I have him in a dynasty league, and I could not be more happy with what is happening in Houston lately. I saw a funny old takes exposed where someone said, Amen Thompson, I'm not worried about Andre Robertson with court vision. That Amen Thompson's is a different kind of athlete, man. Like he makes the top tier athletes look like average Joes sometimes. Upside is through the roof, and even if he never establishes a jumper, I still think he could be fantasy gold for the next 4 or 5 seasons for sure.
And with that, that is the end of today's RotoWire Fantasy Basketball Podcast. We're so happy to have Kirien back. Next week is a big one. It's the day before the NBA trade deadline. So there might be some moves that happen during the show. Hopefully we'll have a move or two before the show starts. Kirien and I will be on top of that to give you all of the information that you need to win your fantasy basketball leagues. Until then, keep your chin up. And we know we lost Jalen Johnson, but let's smile. May the rest of your fantasy team stay healthy, and hopefully you'll get some wins along the way.
Have a good one, everybody.